In the last video, we had just completed the illusion of panning. And here inside of the program, it looks like a big, humongous stage, but if we actually preview it, we see that we do get the illusion that we're after. And if you imagine that this is what we're trying to achieve, our cameraman standing in front of a humongous wall that's painted all these bright different colors and with the numbers, and he just wants to pan from the left starting at number 1, keep moving from the left to the right and view all the different sections of the wall. And it might look something like that. There he's starting to move the camera from the left to the right. Now, however, we know in reality what's happening is that our cameraman, if you will, or our stage is sitting still. But if we want to use the same analogy, let's imagine this is our cameraman, this is his camera, he's standing still, and the world is moving to the left in front of him. So again, we cannot move the camera, we can just move things to make it look like we are. Now, the other thing then is panning, or in addition to panning, is zooming in and out. A technique, I think, when incorporated properly into a video that's nice is to be zoomed so far in. Like in here, it just looks like you're looking at a big sheet of red. And this is a Christopher's animation project, a past student. And when we play the animation, we see that that red is actually an eye. And then about halfway through the video, he incorporates the same technique again, goes from a solid color back to the familiar red color, but in contrasting to the first time when he zoomed out and it was a caterpillar, this time when he zooms out, it's the butterfly that has changed. Am I? And over the years as an animator, you'll build up a whole bag of tricks such as that zooming in and zooming out, and think about how much work those kind of techniques can actually save you. Whereas if you think about, you just watched an animation that was quite convincing of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and you may not even realize it until you analyze it that you didn't actually get to witness body parts changing from a caterpillar's body part to a butterfly's body part and wings growing and things like that, which would be equally interesting but take a lot more time. So I'm not suggesting that you always look for the easy way out, but I'm suggesting that you keep things like that in mind, that sometimes zooming in and zooming out and having the work done of the animation, or if you're trying to make a man change into the Incredible Hulk, sometimes rather than have the camera on the man, put the camera on the shadow, which is just one color, much easier to morph than it is a man with clothes and hair and all these different tones that you have to deal with. So I'm pretty sure you can all figure out how to zoom in and zoom out, but just in the interest of talking about things, if you start out already at the minimum size that this can be and still fill the stage, you can't do a whole lot of zooming out if your intent is to keep the screen filled. So for my zoom out, I've done an F6 here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and select this with the free transform tool, hold down the shift key. And scale it way down. And so we can still affect a zoom out. It's just that it can't fill the stage, right? There's only so much you can do. So if your intent was to have something that size and zoom out and still fill the stage, well, you couldn't. You'd have to, in this frame, start with something that was much bigger. So kind of common sense, but it's just worth saying. And so zooming up, sky's pretty much the limit on that. Do my F6 and I can just make this thing as big as I want, and I can command minus to see more of the working area here. Keep holding down the shift key and And now if I do my classic tween here, you can see that we go to small, and then from small we go to quite large. And then I'll just have it resolve back to where it started, and then we'll move on and talk about how you can make objects work against a panning and a zooming background. I'm just going to create a silly little animated graphic of this guy kind of bouncing back and forth like he's kind of running but like bouncing from side to side. Feel free to create something more sophisticated if you wish, but I'm just going to simply Command C, copy this guy, go back in, paste him here on a new layer, and we'll just call this run. I should almost put a question mark after that, but we'll go ahead and place him right here. Do a F7 and a Command V, and again we'll get these options that come up, and we want center 2 to be checked. Okay, there he is. Again, the import process changed the name, so I went back, called it runner, and then we're just going to convert this guy into a symbol, a graphic symbol. We go into edit the symbol, we can see that he's pretty difficult to see against the background. So I could just go to properties and click on nothing, go to the stage color, and just temporarily change it to black. And I'm still inside of the edit mode for this symbol. I'm going to drag a guide down to kind of represent the floor. And I just want him to kind of bouncing back and forth across the floor. One of those instances where you really have to watch your library, because if we just make a classic tween out of this right now, we'll end up getting these extras that show up. And what the heck, let's just as an example show that. So let me give a kind of a starting point for this guy. I want to kind of rock him all the way one way like this, and have him go from that stage to, let's say, about right here. And I may have to change this, but I'll have them rock back so that the opposite leg is on the ground there, and then have them go back to the initial start. And rather than try to find that, I'm just going to simply copy by option dragging, and then watch the library. When I do my right click and classic tween, there we ended up with all this extra garbage in there that if we would just Command Z, I'm going to back up. Now I do have to delete these, they don't go away on their own. And what I'm going to do now is, unfortunately, I have to go back to here. But so just remember, the first step is always to create things as a symbol or convert to a symbol. And even though we converted this on the main timeline to a symbol, inside of the symbol it's whatever it was, which in this case, when you import things from Illustrator, they become drawing objects. So we just need to select that, do our F8, give it a, and if you want to help keep track of what's what, you could call that runner static, so you know that's just the still frame of the runner, and that the one called runner, which is what we're working on right now with the instances of static runner, is the one where it actually moves. And if we want to see just this area here in a preview, we can go to Control and Test Scene. Even though it's not technically a scene, it will do exactly what we want and preview just this little bit. And that's a little bit too slow for what I'm after. I really want him to look more like he's bouncing, so I'm going to remove probably 3 frames from each section here and then retest. And I ended up removing quite a bit of frames in there to get this movement here. Keep in mind, you could add what you've already learned about easing in and easing out depending on what you're using to make it look even more realistic, but this is far from realistic, so I'm just going to stick with that. Back on the main timeline, I'm going to do several things. I'm going to make our runner a little bit smaller. I'm going to extend these frames, and I am going to move the troubleshoot label out here so we can get to it immediately when we preview the movie. Now, we still have the background set to black, which we'll have to change in a second, but if I go over here to my hidden button, jeez. Hopefully this has taught you the importance of saving every time before you go to preview, because that's about 3 crashes I've had in the past 3 days of doing these videos. Anyway, when we go out and preview the movie now, and notice I did change the background color back, we can jump right to that spot and we see our little guy bouncing back and forth. So we know that if we animated him from left to right, it would kind of look like he's moving, something like this. And as quirky as that is, it does look like he's moving. But sometimes we like to keep the camera on the runner and have the scenery go by. So I removed the tween from the runner, and then let me unlock the background layer here. And on the background layer, let's go ahead and make it go by. First time we'll make it go by too fast, so you can see that you do have to use your visual perception to make this work. So we'll do a F6 right there, and we'll move this thing. Hold down the shift key to keep her in place. Should have zoomed out a little bit more, but get there. Okay, we'll put our classic tween in there, and then if we preview this, you'll see there should be a little bit of, see, it just kind of looks like he's dancing against maybe a movie in the background. So if I slow down the background by extending it, now it kind of looks like he's running against it. You can also have the runner advancing slightly so that it looks like the camera's panning, but that the runner is running faster than the camera's panning. So all that would mean is we just have to take the runner starting position from here, and well, let's just try it like so that he just slightly faster than the camera. So about halfway through the overall animation of the background, he advances somewhat. So we'll just take him from far left, bring him just past center, and put our classic tween in there. And that would look something like this. And then what you might have to do is see, it looks like he slowed down because the camera caught up with him, and if that's what you wanted, fine. But if not, what you'd have to do is right here where he starts staying in the middle is then increase the speed of the background animation, which would be as simple as just putting another keyframe for the background here and then shortening this part of it between here and here so that that part would be moving relatively quicker. Another thing that you'd probably want to do for reality is when the camera catches up to him right here and he's just bouncing back and forth here, is you'd probably want to have him run off stage from there. So you could just do an F6, move him, and you kind of have to pay attention to how fast he should or should not be moving here. But the whole idea is you would just keep going back and forth and removing or adding frames via F5 or Shift F5 until it feels right to you. And so now that looks something like this. So although it's quirky, it works.